Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, Psyche After Dark. I am Psyche and I want to talk about the books I read in January this year. I have talked about all of these here and there. I did a little silent review on TikTok and on YouTube Shorts, but I want to go over them in a little bit more detail and talk about each of them individually. So let's get started. My first book of the year was House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas, which is the first book in the Crescent City series. I've never read this series before, so I was really excited to get started. I technically started it at the end of December, but it was my first finished book of the year and I did read quite a chunk of it in January. I wanted to read Crescent City because the new book was coming out and has now come out at the end of January, so I decided to get into it, especially since I just finished Throne of Glass, which was great, by the way. For anyone who doesn't know, this is Sarah J. Maas's first technically fully adult series. I feel like the other two series have kind of fallen into like young adult / new adult. It's a little more mature and a little darker than ACOTAR and Throne of Glass. It's kind of edgier. It's set in a contemporary modern fantasy setting instead of it being more like a kind of medieval style kind of fantasy setting. Crescent City follows the half fae, half human named Bryce Quinlan as she helps to investigate a murder and gets dragged into a much deeper, darker plot. It has a kind of modern noir vibe to it, which I actually really liked. It's a bit different. I feel like it would have made a really great TV series, which is interesting considering that's not the one that anyone talks about being a good TV series. The world building was a bit much, to be honest. Felt like the first kind of half or so of the book was a bit of an info dump, which I felt was kind of overwhelming and a bit hard to follow at times. It went from like the very beginning being very punchy, and then it became very slow paced, and then it picked up a lot at the end. But I enjoyed the journey anyway, and I think I specifically enjoyed it because it really reminded me of role plays that I used to do on Neopets as a teenager. Don't judge me. It gave me that same vibe, so I guess I liked that a little bit. I also adopted the attitude of it's a fantasy book. If it's important, it'll be repeated, and I'm going to be honest, that really did help because I felt like there was stuff being told, like names being told to me and like types of creatures and fae and stuff being described, and I was like, I'm not gonna remember any of this, but I didn't need to, so it was fine. Overall, I really liked it. It just didn't hit 5 stars for me, so I gave it 4 stars in the end. It did leave me wanting more, but I think the pacing and the world building just pulled it down a peg a little bit. I think it could have been handled a lot better. It was a lot in the beginning. My second and third book, strong word, of the year were Feed and Yours Insatiably by Aveda. They were a novella, which was like the first chapter effectively, and a kind of introduction to the characters, and then a book, right? So I took a little break from Crescent City because they're so long and they're so heavy, and decided that I was going to read these. I also wanted something spicy. So I read Feed, which is, as I said, it's basically like an opening chapter to Yours Insatiably. But they both follow a neurodivergent succubus called Averin and her co-worker, who is a non-binary fae called Pi, and their forbidden desire for each other, which was really nice. Very, very tasty. I will say this is a purely erotica book. However, I will say that the characters, there was a lot of character development. There was a lot of character, I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it, but the author dealt with the characters and their lives and their interactions with one another outside of the erotica, which was really nice. And I actually really loved the fact that Averin was autistic, and we learned a lot about her journey in trying to accept herself as a neurodivergent person in a non-neurodivergent world, and also as a succubus, which she had been kind of fighting against a little bit. And I also really liked the fact that Pi was non-binary, very gender non-conforming, and the author used the he/they pronouns interchangeably throughout the book in a way that was super easy to follow. I just want to see more of that. It was really, really great. I really liked it. The spiciness was absolutely delicious. I'm going to be honest with you. I really, really loved it. It was very hot. And also the characters were really lovable. I really liked them. I found them interesting. I actually cared about them by the end. I gave both of them 4 stars because, while Feed is very much just a chapter, pretty much, they are kind of linked together very, very tightly. It's referenced a lot in Yours Insatiably. I gave both of them 4 stars and 5 chili peppers, both extremely hot. Loved it very, very much. Will read pretty much anything Aveda writes now at this point. I then jumped into House of Sky and Breath by Sarah Sarah J. Maas, which is book 2 in Crescent City. And it was gentler on the info dump. I think she kind of got all of that out of her system in the first book, but I did feel like there was a lot of subplots going on that came out of nowhere. I don't know if everybody feels the same way about that, but I started to forget what the main story was a little bit, and I find everything a little bit hard to follow. It does follow on very shortly after House of Earth and Blood ends, and it follows a rebel plot and another mystery to solve. And the romance and action were both really enjoyable. Really, really liked that. But I did start to get frustrated in the middle with the subplots because I felt like maybe I'm wrong. Because, well, actually, I know I'm wrong. They didn't feel like they furthered the main plot that much. They did eventually. It just felt like it took too long to get there, and we were bouncing back and forth between different things a lot. So I was starting to kind of find that a little bit frustrating. However, I am very easily swayed, and if an author can stick the landing, that will improve the whole thing for me. So I do feel like Sarah J. Maas can get the ending right. A lot of people joke that her last like 100 pages are so fast paced, and that is true. I do think that she pulled me back in a lot for the ending. I did have one line in this book that actually made me wiggle very happily in my chair, and this line was, "You will undo the actions of one ignorant princess 15,000 years ago. If you know, you know." The ending also had me really excited for the next book, so I pulled it back up to a 4-star. I will not spoil the ending. The ending was very good, even though I know Sarah J. Maas absolutely spoiled the ending on her social media, but I really, really enjoyed the ending. I'm very excited, and we will talk about House of Flame and Shadow after. I then read Fall of Ruin and Wrath by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Now, if you know me and you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I love From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and I just wanted more of that. I feel she writes sexual tension like nobody else while still maintaining plot, and it's not pure erotica. It's got plot and it's got a bit of spice, but it's the tension that I really enjoy. So I was like, yeah, I want that, and it's the first book in the series. No other books are out. I'm not going to feel pressured to finish a series, so I wanted to read that. I will tell you about the story, then I will tell you my feelings on it. So it follows Lace, or Callista. She is a spy hidden as a courtesan for a baron, and she gives him information in exchange for his protection, effectively. But basically, she has the power of intuition. No, really, it's intuition. It basically tells her, like, it directs her, it encourages her in certain directions. Sometimes she can even see like visions of things. She uses this to provide the Baron with that information, and that's like why she's super valuable to him. The love interest, on the other hand, and people like him feed on pleasure. So you can imagine that brings up some really fun encounters. I enjoyed the concept a lot, and I actually really liked the world. It didn't feel super heavy on the world building, but I was getting a little bit of it kind of drip fed to me. It was a lot less confusing than From Blood and Ash's world building, in my opinion. However, some of the action scenes were super difficult to follow, especially towards the beginning. I feel like something happened, a scene happened, and because the main character didn't know the name of the character that was in said scene, and then another person showed up and they were both lords, it bounced back and forth between the lord did this and the lord did that, and I was like, I don't know whose hand is where. And it wasn't sexual, it was like an actual like action scene where someone like grabbed her or something, and I just didn't know. I was like, did the other person? I'm not sure what's going on. I felt like it was a bit too confusing, and like the movement in the scene didn't always make sense. For example, there was one example, and I really, maybe I just missed it, but there was one example where it talked about her doing something with a dagger, but it never mentioned her having a dagger. She had a dagger, but it was like sitting by her bedside table, and it was never mentioned that she picked it up or brought it with her. It never mentioned that she drew the dagger. She just used it in a different room. Now, maybe I missed it. Maybe I zoned out and was just vibing. So I'm not going to hold that against it. But I did find that there were a couple of instances of that where I was like, I don't know, did I miss it or did the author just not write it in? It was very confusing. And then I was like, you know what? I'm really enjoying the vibe. However, I have to say, and I could not rate it a 5-star because of this, there were several typos and several spelling or incorrect words used. For example, if he thought this was going to happen, then he had another think coming instead of another thing coming. And there were several instances where the dialogue was formatted poorly, perhaps just on the Kindle edition. So it meant that like it wasn't clear that a new speaker had started, or like two speakers were in the same paragraph. That just bothered me. I feel like that shouldn't have happened. So I pulled it down to a 4. I feel like some people would have probably been harsher, but I liked it and I enjoyed it and I want to read more of it. I just feel like the errors in it kind of pulled me out a little bit and were a bit jarring. And then the fact that I was finding some of the action scenes a little bit difficult to follow. So I pulled it down to a 4. I feel like other people probably would have pulled it down to a 3, but I think 4 is fair. So 4 stars. And for Chili Peppers, I'm going to say 3. It's explicit, but it's not Aveda Vice writing, let's just say. Next up, I read One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I have heard so much about this. It seems to be everybody like rates it a 5-star read. I didn't, but I did enjoy it, and I will tell you why. I needed something not too chunky to read, basically, because I knew I was getting towards the end of January, and I had just kind of finished the House of Sky and Breath, and I also finished the Fall of Ruin and Wrath, and I needed something that I could read before this chunky boy came out. So I decided I was going to try this book, and I thought I could always possibly squeeze in the second book, which I didn't in the end, and there are reasons for that. One Dark Window takes place in like a dark gothic world with a really intriguing magic system. I really liked it. It uses Providence cards, which are like, I guess, kind of tarot cards, and each card has like a specific type of magic, and people who use the magic can cast a specific type of spell, but there is a cost, and the cost is unique to each card. It follows Elspeth, who has a nightmare or a monster living inside her head, which was really interesting, and a prince as they try to cure the town of Blunder, what a great name by the way, from the dark magic that infects it. I really loved the concept. However, I will say that this was supposed to be partially a romance book, and I did not feel that the characters were developed enough. There wasn't enough focus on their backstory, their motivations. I didn't really feel like I knew the love interest at all. And I felt like there was not that much chemistry between the two. It felt like they kind of went from like uneasy allies to kind of having an interest in each other, but there was nothing in between. And like the brief mentions of they had like a kind of forced courtship or like pretend courtship kind of thing going on. And it just, it wasn't that hot. I don't know. I'm not expecting spice. I'm not meaning spice, to be clear. I'm not one of these people who thinks that a book has to have spice in it to be good. I just mean the romance itself did not feel like there was much chemistry to me. I know not everybody agrees with that. I just didn't think there was as much chemistry between the characters. I did enjoy it. I feel like it could have been better. I also thought the world was really small because we were kind of focused on Blunder and the forest and the fact that it was kind of cut off from the rest of the world by this mysterious mist. We didn't really feel like there was anything else beyond that, and you never really hear about anything beyond that. So it did feel very, very confined. And I actually heard someone else talking about this. I read this after I had finished the book already, but people were talking about how you don't really get to learn anything about the culture of the place, like what kind of clothes people wear. It wasn't described in a great deal of detail, what kind of food they eat. There wasn't a lot of development in that respect. So the world building, the dark kind of gothic vibes were great, but the world building wasn't very deep. So I will read the second book. I just didn't have time. It took me a lot longer to read this book than I expected, considering it's quite short. Well, I say it's quite short. It's like 400 and something pages long, but it's quite short compared to the books I'd been reading. I would say I give it 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I do want to read the next book. I will probably read it after I've finished what I'm reading now, but I felt like more could have been done with it. It was very intriguing though, and I did like the dark vibes. I want more gothic fantasy. It was fun. I liked it. 4 stars. I then read another novella by Aveda Vice, surprising absolutely nobody, because I wanted something spicy again. I read Skin with the intention of going on into the novel that followed it. However, I did run out of time. I did start it. So Skin is a novella following a banshee called Harbinger and her gargoyle bodyguard called Flint. And y'all, I love me a bodyguard romance. So I really enjoyed it. The novella, short, snappy, super spicy, really loved it. Super recommend it. And I have also started the follow-up, which is called Inextricably Tied. I just have not finished it. I'm about 35% of the way through according to Kindle, I think. And I will finish it once I'm finished with House of Flame and Shadow, but definitely recommend it. I gave 4 stars to Skin. I do feel like Inextricably Tied is probably also going to be a 4-star, but we'll see how it goes throughout the rest of the book. Both of them so far 5 Chili Peppers though. Absolutely love them. Highly recommend. I swear I will read anything Aveda Vice writes at this point. I honestly just absolutely love those books. And if you're looking for pure spice, please. Skin, great, fantastic. And that's it for January. I genuinely did think I would actually read more. This is probably the most I've read in 1 month in a long time. I thought I would read more though, because I thought I was going to be able to squeeze a couple of books in between finishing House of Sky and Breath. I completely forgot what it's called. Between finishing House of Sky and Breath and House of Flame and Shadow coming out. However, because of the things I picked and the pacing of them, I feel like I slowed down a little bit. I also had a lot of stuff I've had to do, so I didn't get to finish as much as I would like. However, I will say I'm still reading actively several books. I'm reading Inextricably Tied by Aveda, which is currently on pause, and I'm also reading this baby. So this is House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. First of all, how flippin' beautiful is this book? It's absolutely stunning. And I look at the inside. Oh, don't read the page. If you've not read the books, don't read the page. I really, really like it. It is probably going to be getting all of my time until I've finished it. I'm currently only about 15% of the way through, and I'm enjoying it a lot. But yes, I have to address the elephant in the room. I will be counting novellas, even if they're 62 pages long, Aveda, as a book that I have completed. Because if I'm going to be counting several 800 to 1,000 page books, I think I should also get to count a novella as a book. And I also don't really read that many novellas, so I will be counting those. And they all even out in the end. According to Storygraph, I read, on average, mostly books that are around 400 pages, but I think that's mostly because I read several chunky boys, and then I read shorter novellas as well. So I am going to be counting both. Also, look at like Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is actually 6 books compressed into 3, and you still count them as one book, so it's fine. I mean, one book each, not one book altogether. I also should mention that I started Strong Female Character by Fern Brady, which is about, she's a comedian, by the way, in the UK, Scottish, to be very specific. She talks about her journey being diagnosed as autistic as an adult and a woman, and I'm enjoying it so far. I just haven't finished it, so I have not given a review, but I will probably, because it's not fiction, it takes me a little bit longer to get through it because I tend to gravitate towards fiction first, but I will get through it probably in the next month, and then I'll give a review maybe in February. Thanks so much for hearing me ramble about books. I love talking about books. As you can probably tell, I'm still figuring out my rating system. I feel almost like I need a scale for how good a book is and how much I enjoyed a book because of its vibes. Because I will say I do enjoy some arguably just not good books, but I still like them, even though I can say, yeah, but it's not well written, it's not this, it's not that. So I'm still figuring it out. I don't know. I think I'm probably more generous than most people with ratings, but whatever. Who cares? I'm just a happy person and I enjoy books. What have you read in January? I would really love to hear if you have any recommendations for things that you've read in January. And also, if you're reading House of Flame and Shadow, I'd love to hear your opinions. Just don't spoil it. Don't spoil it. Okay? Now I'm going to go and finish this beast. Well, now I'm going to go and read more of this beast, probably for the rest of the day. So see you next time.